As Europe watches election results and new governments forming in Berlin or Brussels, a far graver crisis is quietly unfolding to the east. While headlines dissect coalitions and count ballots, the real story, the one that could redraw the very map of the continent, is being written in blood and rubble on Ukraine's eastern front. In the battered streets of Kupiansk and Vovchansk, Russian forces have launched synchronized assaults, targeting Ukraine's weakest seams. These are not isolated clashes or diversions. They are calculated, high-risk offensives designed to punch holes in Ukraine's defenses, where they are already stretched to the breaking point. Should these lines snap, Ukraine could lose not only territory, but the core of its sovereignty and the future security of the entire region. Kiev has tried to quiet alarm, hoping to shore up morale and buy precious time. But Moscow's intent is unmistakable: to grind down Ukraine's army on multiple fronts, exhausting its men, its ammunition, and its will to resist. This is not about incremental land grabs. It is about shattering Ukraine's ability to defend itself at all. The world's attention is drifting at the very moment it should be sharpest. If these battles are lost, the consequences will not stop at Ukraine's borders. Security, economic stability, and the entire balance of power in Europe could tip overnight. In these two cities, the fate of a nation, and perhaps the future order of Europe, hangs by a thread. While the world debates politics, the reality on the ground in Ukraine is far more dire. The next moves from both sides will determine not just the outcome of these battles, but the fate of Eastern Europe itself. Why do the names Kupiansk and Vovchansk echo with dread among Ukrainian commanders? These are not just remote towns lost in the shuffle of global headlines. Each is a linchpin anchoring the entire northeastern defense of Ukraine, a living shield against collapse. If either falls, the damage will ripple far beyond a mere shift in the front line. It could shatter the region's last credible bulwark. Kupiansk occupies a crossroads of fate, straddling the Oskil River. This is no ordinary waterway. It is both a natural barrier and a strategic lifeline, connecting southern and western routes, including the direct artery to Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city. Control of Kupiansk has always been fiercely contested. Its loss would unbolt several doors for a Russian advance, threatening to redraw the entire map and tactics of the war. To illustrate Kupiansk's significance, consider the historical precedent of the Battle of Stalingrad during the Second World War. Just as the Volga River served as a crucial artery in that conflict, the Oskil River now forms a backbone for movement, supply, and defense. When Stalingrad fell under siege, the entire southern flank of the Eastern Front was threatened, and a similar dynamic is at play in Kupiansk. Loss here could expose vast territories to further Russian advances, just as the loss of a single linchpin city once meant the difference between containment and catastrophe on the Volga. Vovchansk, positioned further north, is another critical transport hub. Whoever holds Vovchansk can drive west, aiming to sever Ukrainian formations still clinging to ground in the east. This is not just grinding house-to-house combat. It is a race for control over reinforcements and supply flows, a struggle to decide who is cut off and who will be surrounded. In recent days, Russian forces have overrun most of Vovchansk. Ukrainian defenders are now compressed into shrinking pockets, forced into a desperate defense as Russian units constrict the perimeter. Each lost block is one more turn of the vice, edging closer to full encirclement. Imagine the scenario of the Warsaw Uprising in the 1940s, where Polish resistance was encircled and starved of supplies as German forces tightened their grip. In Vovchansk, Ukrainian defenders face a similar predicament. As the noose tightens, each avenue of escape closes, and the ability to reinforce or withdraw dwindles to nothing. The slow-motion disaster unfolding now echoes the tragic siege dynamics that have marked Europe's bloodiest conflicts. For Ukraine, the stakes could scarcely be higher. Should Kupiansk and Vovchansk fall, the entire eastern defensive network could unravel. Such a loss would expose Kharkiv to immediate danger and set off a chain reaction of retreats, threatening to plunge the region into chaos. But why is the situation so precarious now? What new tactics are Russian forces employing in this latest offensive? To understand the urgency, we need to examine what has shifted on the ground. Russian strategy has evolved, and the consequences are already being felt. This is not just a contest of firepower, it is a crucible of attrition, strategy, and psychological warfare. Across the Eastern Front, Russia is pressing forward with coordinated, multi-directional offensives, forcing Ukraine to defend on several axes at once, all while Ukrainian reserves are dangerously stretched. Consider the ancient principle of attacking simultaneously at multiple weak points, famously outlined by military theorist Karl von Clausewitz. In the Napoleonic Wars, similar strategies were used to paralyze defenders, splitting their forces and leaving them unable to concentrate their strength anywhere. Russia is now employing a modern version of this timeless tactic, pressing along divergent lines in the hope of overwhelming Ukraine's ability to respond. Ukrainian commanders are trapped in impossible dilemmas. Reinforcing one sector leaves another dangerously exposed. Spreading forces too thin risks collapse everywhere. Every move is a gamble, and the odds grow worse with each passing day. Russian strategy is deliberate and ruthless. Rather than relying on blunt assaults, they focus on encirclement, cutting off Ukrainian supply lines, isolating garrisons, and choking resistance from within. The aim is not only to break formations, but to shatter morale by sowing panic and confusion deep inside Ukrainian ranks. Let's imagine a specific scenario. A Ukrainian commander learns that Russian units have breached the northern edge of Vovchansk. He has only enough reserves to reinforce one section of the line. If he sends them north, the southern approach to Kupiansk becomes vulnerable. If he splits his forces, both flanks risk collapse. This is the classic Devil's Fork dilemma faced in countless battles throughout history, from the encirclement at Cannae in ancient Rome to the fate of French divisions during the fall of France. Ukrainian counterattacks are stalling. Ammunition is close to depleted. Artillery support is sporadic, and air cover has all but vanished. Reserve units are rare and often exhausted. Reports describe morale slipping as soldiers face grim odds, poor coordination, and little hope for relief. The situation is worsened by command failures. Russian electronic warfare scrambles communications, leading to contradictory or delayed orders. Intelligence is fragmentary. Commanders lose touch with unfolding events, leaving frontline units isolated and directionless. Material exhaustion is now constant. Western aid trickles in, but never fast enough to replace what is lost. Ukrainian casualties and equipment losses outpace reinforcements, while shortages of ammunition and vehicles threaten to halt even basic defense. To put this in context, remember the fate of the Russian army in the First World War. Despite initial numerical superiority, chronic shortages, poor logistics, and slow replacement of lost materiel led to collapse on the Eastern Front. Ukraine now faces a modern echo of this catastrophic supply and morale crisis. The risk is stark. If these weaknesses deepen, Ukraine faces not just further territorial losses, but the collapse of its military command structure, and with it, the will to fight. So what if Russia intensifies this pressure? The front is balanced on a knife's edge. In the coming weeks, the fate of Ukraine and the stability of the region may be decided. Let us break down the scenarios that could unfold if Russian offensives succeed in widening these cracks. The consequences could reach far beyond the battlefield. A chain reaction is poised to reshape the entire region. What unfolds next will reverberate far beyond the battlefield. Should Russian forces seize Vovchansk and manage to encircle Kupiansk, they would carve open a corridor straight to Ukraine's most vital cities. The defenses shielding Kharkiv would be reduced to a fragile line, barely holding back a potential flood. This is not limited to the fate of a few border settlements. It is about laying bare the Ukrainian core to rapid, deep incursions. Such a breach could allow Russian units to engineer a massive encirclement, isolating tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops. If these formations are trapped, resistance across the Eastern Front could unravel in a matter of days. The magnitude of this disaster would be immense. Entire brigades risk being wiped out, Ukraine's regional command structure shattered. Let's consider a hypothetical. If a force of 20,000 Ukrainian troops is cut off, with no viable supply lines and under constant artillery bombardment, history suggests that collapse could follow within 1 or 2 weeks. In the Second World War, entire Soviet armies were encircled and destroyed in similar conditions on the Eastern Front, resulting in catastrophic losses and the rapid redrawing of front lines. The psychological consequences could be even more profound. Ukrainian morale, already worn thin by unending casualties and pressure, might finally snap. Panic would not remain confined to the trenches. Fear could ripple through society, leading to retreats, surrenders, or desertions far from the front. At the same time, Kiev's leadership seems increasingly removed from the grim realities faced by its soldiers. Grand speeches and confident statements ring hollow to exhausted defenders. The chasm between official optimism and the bloody truth only deepens the sense of betrayal and hopelessness among the ranks. Economically, the crisis accelerates. As support from Western partners dwindles, Ukraine's resources to fund the war and basic state functions dwindle by the week. People now face the specter of state breakdown, unpaid wages, failing infrastructure, and a government fighting just to survive. For Russia, this is not a war of sweeping blitzkriegs. It is a relentless, methodical grind, the slow suffocation of Ukraine's military, economy, and collective spirit. Each new encirclement, every lost stronghold, and every battered defensive line brings Ukraine closer to collapse, while Russia tightens its hold, piece by piece. Here, the concept of salami tactics becomes instructive. Coined during the Cold War to describe the Soviet Union's step-by-step absorption of Eastern European states, it captures the gradual yet inexorable way in which Russia now nibbles away at Ukraine's front lines and morale. The stakes could scarcely be greater. Ukraine's future and the thin shield separating Russia from the rest of Europe hang in the balance. Should Ukrainian defenses break, redrawn borders and a destabilized continent could haunt the region for generations. Yet even as the military situation worsens, a quieter crisis is brewing behind the lines, one that could prove just as decisive. The resilience of Ukraine's civil society and the willingness of its people to endure are about to be tested as never before. The oldest trap in war is confusing heroism with self-destruction. When does courage cross the line into needless sacrifice? This is the razor's edge Ukraine walks today. Instead of conserving strength for future battles, Kiev's commanders cling to every trench, every block, refusing withdrawal even when positions are hopelessly exposed. The result: elite Ukrainian units, instead of regrouping, are being encircled and shattered, piece by piece, an echo of history's most ruinous mistakes. For a historical parallel, remember the encirclement at Dunkirk. There, British commanders chose evacuation over annihilation, preserving the core of their army for future battles. In contrast, the fate of the Sixth Army at Stalingrad was sealed by refusal to retreat, ending in destruction and surrender. Ukraine's leadership faces a similar fateful choice: to conserve or to risk everything for ground that may no longer be defensible. Moscow's strategy is not to seize empty fields. Their true aim is systematic and chilling: to destroy the veteran core of Ukraine's army. Each destroyed battalion wipes out years of training, trust, and battlefield experience in mere days, losses that cannot be replaced by new recruits or foreign aid. But the true damage cuts deeper than numbers. With each encirclement, a shadow spreads through Ukrainian ranks, the realization that sacrifice is becoming futility. Morale phrase. Soldiers ask if their struggle means anything beyond delaying the inevitable. This slow-drip despair spreads faster than any artillery barrage, cracking the will to fight from within. Meanwhile, Russian troops move with growing assurance. Their confidence is rooted in unity of command, a shared sense of purpose, and the belief that hardship now will secure their nation's future. Even when material advantages are slim, this invisible edge turns setbacks into lessons and creates momentum where others see only stalemate. There is also a ruthless economic logic at work. For Moscow, every cost is framed as investment. Investment in security, in new resources, in the reintegration of contested regions. If they prevail, borders will be redrawn, economies reoriented, and strategic depth gained. For Ukraine, every lost brigade or city shrinks not just territory, but economic lifeblood and hope for recovery. The long-term consequences are already taking shape. As Russia absorbs and fortifies new areas, national morale inside its borders rises. Each advance is broadcast as proof of strength and destiny fulfilled. For Ukraine, every encircled force and abandoned community chips away at the very foundations of statehood, accelerating a spiral that no outside support can easily reverse. The warning is clear and timeless. When leaders prioritize image or glory over adaptation and survival, they gamble with their nation's future. Only by facing hard truths and shifting tactics in real time can a country endure calamity and preserve hope for what comes after. Yet this crisis is unfolding largely out of sight, eclipsed by headlines from Western capitals. As the world looks elsewhere, the fate of Ukraine and the future security of Europe hangs by a thread. Everything now hangs in the balance. What future do you see, and how will you act when the moment comes? These past weeks have shattered illusions. The battles for Kupiansk and Vovchansk are not distant headlines. They are pivotal clashes, with the power to redraw Eastern Europe's map for a generation or more. As competing narratives multiply and official statements collide with independent reports, the real danger sharpens. If we, as citizens, settle for easy answers or turn away from harsh realities, we forfeit our influence over choices that will shape our security and prosperity for decades. Misinformation and silence do more than blur truth. They hand the reins of the future to those with the narrowest aims. Ukraine stands at a crossroads, hemmed in by hard choices. Should its leaders persist with existing tactics, pivot toward adaptation, or open the door to difficult compromise? Each path carries risk, cost, and unknown consequences, not just for Ukraine, but for every nation with a stake in the region's fate. Let's explore 3 possible future scenarios to clarify the crossroads ahead. First, the path of attritional defense. Ukrainian forces continue to hold every inch, leading to further encirclements and potentially catastrophic losses. Over time, this could sap the country's remaining strength, making recovery, even if international aid increases, an uphill struggle for years to come. Second, a strategic withdrawal. Ukraine pulls back to more defensible lines, sacrificing territory to preserve its army and buy time. This echoes decisions made in the Korean War, when United Nations forces ceded ground to regroup and launch counterattacks. The result could be a stabilized front and a chance for negotiation, though the political cost would be immense. Third, the pursuit of a negotiated settlement. Ukraine's leadership, recognizing the risk of collapse, seeks dialogue and compromise. History is replete with examples of hard-won armistices that spared nations further devastation, such as the armistice signed after the First World War. But such a path would entail difficult concessions and a redefinition of national goals. This is where your attention matters most. Honest, probing debate is our last defense against decisions made behind closed doors, or justified by half-truths. In moments like this, informed public engagement can sway policy, mobilize international support, and spark the will to adapt before disaster hardens into destiny. What, then, are the practical steps that can be taken by those outside Ukraine who care about the region's future? First, demand transparency from your leaders. Insist that aid is delivered efficiently and that its impact is honestly reported. Support independent journalism that provides on-the-ground reporting from conflict zones, shedding light on realities that governments may wish to obscure. Second, learn from history. Study past conflicts, how they escalated, how they ended, and what missteps prolonged suffering. Understanding the lessons of places like Stalingrad, Dunkirk, and Korea can help us recognize the warning signs and advocate for strategies that avoid repeating tragic mistakes. Third, support humanitarian organizations working to alleviate suffering among civilians. The fate of Ukraine is not just a military equation. It is about the resilience and survival of millions. Donating, volunteering, or raising awareness can make a tangible difference. Fourth, foster dialogue in your communities. Encourage open discussion of the conflict's realities, pushing back against misinformation and polarization. Social cohesion and informed debate are powerful antidotes to propaganda and fatalism. Fifth, prepare for the long term. The outcome in Ukraine will shape European security for decades. Support policies that invest in resilience, energy independence, robust alliances, and the defense of democratic norms to ensure that Europe is prepared for whatever future emerges. We have traced how Russian offensives have exposed vulnerabilities in Ukrainian defense and leadership, and how these outcomes could tip the balance across Eastern Europe. But the essential question is not just what unfolds on the battlefield. It is how society chooses to understand, discuss, and confront the crisis before irreversible lines are drawn in blood and territory. History is not only forged by armies, it is shaped by those who refuse to look away. As events accelerate, will you demand deeper answers and help steer the conversation? Or will you let your future be decided by the unchecked flow of events? The window for honest dialogue is narrowing. Let us close with a call to awareness and action. In the coming weeks, the names Kupiansk and Vovchansk may become synonymous with turning points, moments when history's course could have been altered by timely recognition and collective effort. The crisis in Ukraine is not distant. It is immediate, interconnected, and consequential for every citizen of Europe and beyond. As the front lines shift and the fate of a nation hangs in the balance, the world must decide: watch in silence or rise to meet the challenge of our times. The choice, as always, is ours.